Truth. Face it, know it, love it. Thank you for taking the time to listen. You are well on your way to knowing the truth. Most people in this world know little of truth. They fail to recognize how so important it is to know truth. Most will never realize the truth until it is too late. So please take this work seriously and give it a chance to teach you. Truth, it's everywhere. It's in plain sight to see. But yet most do not see it. Why does truth matter? Why is it so important to know truth? Because truth is love, it's light, it's peace, it's perfection, it's everything you need to manifest the life you always dreamed of. For one to not know truth, they lack knowledge and substance. For they are blind, whether it be by forgetfulness or by trickery. They live in an illusion, surrounded by lies, living a life in darkness, and usually one ending in pain, misery, and leading to non-existence. For we were created in God's image. We started as beings of light, love, and of pure truth. Humanity is now in trouble. I fear time is short and anyone needing to wake up should wake up now. Don't wait. Correct oneself, know truth, and live in the spirit of Jesus Christ. For one will not be saved without knowing truth. For if their knowledge of truth is lost, they are nothing, no thing. And one that is nothing, does not exist. So know truth and you will know God. And even those who believe they know truth, better double check. This is way too important to be wrong. For one that does not even take the time to listen is ignorant. Matthew chapter 11 verse 15 King James Version KJV 15 He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. Plato. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true, the other is to refuse to believe what is true. Soren Kierkegaard. Sometimes we find ourselves walking through life blindfolded, and we try to deny that we're the ones who securely tied the knot. Jodi Picoult, Vanishing Acts. The hardest thing to explain is the glaringly evident which everybody has decided not to see. Ayn Rand, The Fountainhead. Now I'm going to start feeding you facts, the truth. Just know that they are proven and linked by reference wherever possible. Watch and listen to each one. Try not to immediately have any emotion to what is stated and not judge what has been revealed. Just record the information given, within your mind, for use at a later time. Don't let the mind slow you down by trying to analyze the information, just record it. Don't let the mind wander into the past, thinking what could have been. Don't let the mind wander to the future, thinking what is to come. Stay in the present. Stay in the now. I pray you have success in knowing the truth. For the truth will set you free.
Do you have an open mind? What is your answer? Let me guess.
Oh, figure it out. I'm going to use all the power of my brain.
Yes. The 3 stages of the truth. All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident.
How do you do? How are you? All right? Good share.
Should you read watch? The news. A few corporations own the media.
Let me tell you something. I'm going to give you 48 years of study. I'm going to give you a secret. Okay. Nothing in this world is what you think it is. Nothing operates the way you think it does.
What do you mean?
Nothing operates the way you think it does.
What do you mean?
Government does not work the way you think it does.
It's not about people voting for a president.
No, it has nothing to do with that. We're talking money. We're talking control, corporations, big business, period.
It's all big business and money.
Period.
Yeah.
End of sentence. Now, religion is a corporation. It's all the religions of the Western world, especially in the Western world, all religions operate under maritime admiralty law. So there are certain...
What do you mean maritime admiralty law?
Maritime admiralty is the law of water, and I talk a lot about this in the past. I'm going to talk a lot about it in the future.
Okay.
There are only two things on the earth, on this earth, land and water.
Right.
So there are two kinds of law, the law of the land and the law of water. The law of the land is the custom of the people who live on a particular piece of land. So the law of the land is different in every country.
Right.
I mean, you can do things in Russia you can't do in America.
Right.
You can do things in South Africa you can't do in China because it's the law of the land. That particular piece of land has their own custom. So the custom of the people living on a particular piece of land is called the law of the land.
Okay, got it.
But there is also a larger, far more important law on the earth. It's called the law of the sea, the law of the water. And when you get into, and then that law is referred to in courts as maritime admiralty. Maritime admiralty is the law of water. Once you understand the law of water, it opens up a world of occult hidden symbols and hidden foundations on how we live.
If there is to be a broadening of perspective and the complete end to the use of conspiracy theorist as a counterfeit attack on those who are daring to question anything outside of the preordained official authority, then this short phrase needs to be integrated into the very fibers of one's inner intelligence. The opportunity of this moment is being thrown away and degenerated through the overuse of this manipulative psychological technique and tool. To call anyone stupid, slow, insane, screwed in the head, or a conspiracy theorist are all examples of ad hominem attacks. To laugh at anyone for any reason whatsoever during any serious inquiry into any information is an ad hominem attack. Mockery and insults prove nothing. As correct as this may be, the approach to questioning information and material need not include so much enmity. Many insults have been hurled, but these do nothing to unveil the mystery. Humiliation is a commonly used maneuver to keep the truth veiled, and only a mass shift in the perception of this tactic can prevent its effectiveness. Calling someone insane or stupid and chuckling at something as if it's just known to be erroneous are not proofs of anything. Ignorance, no matter how clever, does not slay the inner dragon. It simply continues a never-ending sword battle with shadows. Insults, cleverness, and humiliation are fun, and each of us has the choice to treat life and each other as a joke and a game, or to take it serious, yet paradoxically, not to take oneself seriously. The clever mind wants it both ways. It enjoys the cognitive dissonance that somehow war actually does create peace, or that restriction is somehow liberating. Should one treat such profound information as has been presented like a joke? Then what of life? The paradox to take home is that when one wants it all, one ends up with nothing. Yet, when one wants nothing, they can then attain it all. Freedom. This is a methodology of mental offense that is used again and again because it caters to the bias and prejudices of the minds to which it is directed at, while simultaneously creating an onslaught of humiliation for those that this attack is directed against. How many in the truth movement even, or those who declare themselves to be awake and aware, get caught up in the emotional swings of this style of argumentation? All of it leading to a dead end. Remember, just as the internet has increased the availability and access to information, so too did the printing press do the same starting around 1440. People questioned the church more, they questioned the government more. Greater scientific discoveries abounded, and people could begin to discern a lot more of what this reality was about for themselves. And yet, here we are, not truly any better off, and not 1 inch closer to being free. What happened? Ad hominem happened, which is the entire basis of organized religion and politics. Everyone got fired up defending their own mental territories, while divide and conquer again ruled the day. The same will happen once more if this roughshod tactic of mental abuse continues the way it is going, while also continuing to escalate, because is not meditative insight. It is not philosophical inquiry. It is not scientific advancement. It is not a proof of anything. It is not a fact or a validation. It is not an increase in objective or subjective mental awareness. It is simply insults, bias, attacking a person or their character or perhaps even others around them as opposed to unveiling the truth does nothing for anyone. The use of ad hominem needs to be recognized for what it is when anyone uses it, most especially one's awakened and aware self.
Time, gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, for purposes of debate only, I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Traficant.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes without objection.
We are here now in Chapter 11. Members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in world history, the U.S. government. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. There are some that say it's a coroner's report that will lead to our demise.
The American Illusion. Background and framework: the Roman civil law republican government founded by the original Constitution, 1787, is claimed no longer operational. Instead, what is called the Government of the United States is a bankrupt private corporation, owned, underwritten, and functioning in commerce as a front for the international bankers and the powers that be with which said bankers are allied. The entire institution, i.e., US Inc., is private, not free, enterprise administering the ongoing business and political ends of the actual owners. In this current scenario, every action of US Inc. is a commercial transaction by and between fictitious entities, all transpiring for the purpose of furthering the economic and political objectives of the alleged creditors. This situation arose from the borrowing by USA from European central banks and owing the unpaid indebtedness to the Crown from the original joint venture agreement between the colonies, which are corporations of the Crown, and the Crown per se. It appears as though USA has been bankrupt from inception, i.e., from 1788, and the Constitution was drafted to reconstitute the unpaid debt and structure an organization for functioning in bankruptcy. The Civil War was staged and financed by the bankers and the Crown to conquer the nation by engaging in the timeless strategy of divide and conquer. Pitting North against South resulted in the dissolution of the de jure federal government of the organic constitution. The states were drawn into the central government, as were, progressively, the people directly, with the whole conglomerate operating through the new federal government in the emergency war powers of 12 Stat. 319, 1861, under the law of necessity. Thus, the government functions under mere color appearance only of government, with the president as acting dictator on behalf of the bankers under the president's capacity as commander-in-chief of the military. I.e., when the 7 southern states walked out of Congress on March 27, 1861, Congress, and, indeed, the entire de jure government of USA under the original Constitution, dissolved based on absence of a congressional quorum to adjourn and reconvene. The result is that the actual winner of the Civil War was neither the North nor the South, but the bankers who owned the new federal government that defeated both North and South and absorbed and subserved the states into itself. In accordance, inter alia, with the Limited Liability Act of 1851, the Emergency War Powers, 12 Stat. 319, the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and the constitutional provision allowing Congress authority to pass any law Congress wishes within the 10-mile square territory of Washington, D.C., Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, the 14th Amendment was proclaimed ratified in 1868. Within that framework, on February 21, 1871, Congress passed the District of Columbia Organic Act, 41st Congress, Session 3, Chapter 62, page 419, 16 Stat. 419, an act to provide a government for the District of Columbia, which act was revised in 1874 and reorganized June 8, 1878, 20 Stat. 102, Chap. 180, 45th Congress, 2nd Session, an act providing a permanent form of government for the District of Columbia. This government is a private corporation now known and copyrighted by such names as the United States Government, United States, US, USA, etc., all referenced herein as US Inc. It is important to understand that US Inc. is not a country, but a corporation, and indeed a bankrupt corporation operating under color of government as the front and device for administering the conquest in law and commerce of the United States of America. The 14th Amendment and US Inc. are all private international law in the Admiralty Maritime Law Merchant of Roman Civil Law. The 14th Amendment states, all persons born or naturalized in the United States, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. This amendment allows US Inc. to have complete jurisdiction over citizens, i.e., corporate subsets of US Inc., which the de jure federal government did not and could not possess. The 14th Amendment also states, Section 4, the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, per 12 Stat. 319, shall not be questioned. The 14th Amendment established the framework for complete conquest and absorption of the country, rendering the people permanent debtors, indentured servants in involuntary servitude, peonage, and also enemies of the government as a result. In accordance with 12 State 319, any aspect of US Inc. may summarily confiscate property in rem without necessity for judicial process whenever any citizen asserts a challenge to the laws of the United States, i.e., US Inc. Remnants of the de jure government remained after the 14th Amendment, however, based on such things as the continuing circulation of gold and silver coin, the money of sovereigns, and the fact that senators were still elected to the Senate by electors of the states rather than by direct, popular vote. Senators became elected by direct vote of the people with the passage of the 17th Amendment. The Civil War had forced each sovereign state to pledge its assets as collateral and become surety and a cosigner for the defaulted federal government's debt to the bankers. This procedure was repeated in the 1933 bankruptcy, at which time gold and silver coin substance were outlawed as money for citizens of the United States. Fictions. Inability to use gold and silver as money solidified the bankruptcy of US Inc. and foreclosed every such citizen from accessing real money for use in payment of debts, thereby denying access to sovereignty. US Inc. is completely devoid of rights, substance, standing in law, and sovereign character, as is every citizen of the United States. The creation and nature of the strawman. Because additional pledging of assets was required to enable the now bankrupt corporation to continue to operate when civilly dead, the governors of all the states met to discuss the emergency declared by Franklin D. Roosevelt, i.e., the bankruptcy, and how to reorganize US Inc. to continue functioning when bankrupt by means of insurance underwriting by the creditors. The governors of the states made a pledge to US Inc. to underwrite the bankruptcy through a grand scheme of limited liability insurance. The people, through their certificates of live birth, aka newborn identification, were registered in the office of the county recorder by registered agents of the government such as the registered doctor and registered nurse, and were thereby established as property of the state. Remember, register derives from regius, meaning king, whereby everything registered is there to record and keep track of the king's property. The newborn identification is identified with, and attaches to, the flesh and blood being by taking a drop of blood and the print, usually footprint, of the baby and applying them to the newborn identification. Once that certificate is registered, it is recorded as a certificate of title, as it were, to the real being. Since the point is to be able to enslave the child and render him a surety for the debt of the bankrupt U.S. Inc., it makes no difference who or what the baby is. Everyone becomes classified as fungible goods, like interchangeable bales of cotton. The parents did not understand what was happening, so the process was thereby fraud based on deceit and non-disclosure. Obviously, with full disclosure of the terms and conditions involved in the alleged contract, no one would agree to go along with it. The agents of the government perpetrate a fraudulent transfer by registering the name, blood, and footprint of beings that is birthed by the living woman and not the corporate state, which can generate only more legal fictions, not real beings. This process amounts to theft of the real being by filing a piece of paper. The state did not create the name from which the all-caps strawman was derived, only colored the name into a form they could use. The name in upper and lower case letters pertains to the real being, while the all-caps strawman is a legal fiction used as credit against which to borrow at the expense of the life force of the living being to which the name and registered newborn identification allegedly relates. When the governors of the states, at the Conference of Governors of March 6, 1933, pledged as state-registered assets the newborn identifications of those born in the state to the federal bankruptcy, the People's Energy was established as the collateral for backing the whole operation, the entire national debt. Since the states, being fictitious, commercial entities with no capacity to recognize real beings, could not pledge private, living people or their property, a bridge was needed between the living people and the bankruptcy of the federal U.S. Inc. To accomplish this result, the Department of Commerce in Washington, D.C., in order to function as a shill to operate out front publicly in place of the people, created the strawman. The scheme had to be so clever that the people would agree to operate as surety for the debts, charges, and obligations of the strawman without knowing what was happening to them, who did it, what they were agreeing to, or how the whole process worked. The birth certificate with the all-caps name created by the U.S. Department of Commerce is a certificate of equity interest, akin to a pink slip, pertaining to a vehicle, and possibly a bill of lading, a document of bailment, which ships the cargo, new and original birth certificate, into the special maritime jurisdiction of the creditors to operate as collateral to back the bankruptcy reorganization of U.S. Inc. via the governor's pledge. The all-caps strawman is thereby birthed, like a vessel, into the private, international law special maritime jurisdiction of the bankers, al., as a citizen of the United States born, birthed, or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. By this scheme the living people assumed the role of guarantor, accommodation party, and surety for the legal fiction that functions for the benefit and enrichment of the creditors. In this scenario it is the strawman, not the living being, that operates throughout the entirety of today's law and commerce. One need only look at the Social Security card, school records, passports, driver's licenses, credit cards, utility bills, etc., all of which are always in all capital letters, just as are gravestones of dead people all over the world and the parties to a dispute on the caption of a court brief, to see the ubiquitous use of the strawman in today's commercial and legal world. A surety is defined as the one who is responsible to pay. The real man is the surety and liable by contract to pay for the debts and obligations of the strawman, even though the real man is not, nor does he own, nor does he receive title to, anything purchased or accomplished by use of the strawman. The strawman is owned by U.S. Inc. and the banks that purchase bonds issued by the Treasury against the strawman as credit. As stated, U.S. Inc. is bankrupt, and has been since 1933. U.S. Inc. has no gold or silver to pay any debts and is civilly dead. Having neither possession, nor right of possession, nor legal capacity to use gold and silver, i.e., lawful money, the only asset left to finance the continued operation of the bankrupt U.S. Inc., i.e., the government, was the people, who were hypothecated as the credit collateral to finance the bankruptcy. U.S. Inc. uses the substance and labor of the people to finance its entire operation, reorganization and insurance underwriting. The scenario is extremely sophisticated, resulting in the operation of a vast and pervasive administration of legalized peonage, slavery, permanent indentured servitude, and collectivism, communism, wherein the people have forfeited all standing in law and are dead to rights. The powers that be borrow against your life, rights, and labor to finance their administration of the system they use to exploit, plunder, and dominate you, all under the presumption that they are acting as your agents to fulfill your own requests. In this scheme, one is punished when one fails to pay or obey. The sequence of steps involved in creating the existing system, in accordance with the best research to date resulting from the efforts of many devoted people, is as follows in the United States. 1. A living, flesh and blood baby is born from its mother's womb. 2. The legal, commercial system, existing and functioning entirely in the abstract realm of words, contracts, legal persons, corporate entities, laws, symbols, ideas, commerce, private international law, etc., which constitutes the matrix, cannot see, recognize, or deal directly with the real world, including real people. The system itself is imaginary, while the real world is genuine and substantive. Consequently, the system deals only with documents and matters in the abstract realm that form, by presumption, ratified implied contract attached to the real world by operation of law and the tacit consent of the people. 3. Just after birth, the involved doctors and hospitals have the mother sign a birth certificate, i.e., a certificate of live birth, without telling the mother, and undoubtedly without themselves knowing the truth, that by so doing she and the doctor are criminally informing on her newborn baby as an enemy of the state in accordance with the war powers and turning the baby over to the bankers as chattel property and slave, pledging the baby's life energy and labor in perpetuity as the collateral for borrowing into existence all currency. Debt paper that passes as money today. 4. The original birth certificate, a certificate of live birth, constitutes, as it were, a certificate of title to the real being, and is in essence the equivalent of a manufacturer's statement or certificate of origin, i.e., MSO or MCO, which is created upon manufacturing an automobile and constitutes title to the vehicle. 5. Just as in the case of a car, anything being registered in the legal system is established on the record as property of the king. The key here is registered, a word deriving from regis, meaning king, whereby everything registered is recorded as the king's property. 6. The sequence of steps concerning the birth certificate appears to be as follows. A. After registration of the certificate of live birth in the office of the county recorder makes a certified, true copy or microfilm, retains it, and sends the original to the Department of Commerce in the state. B. As in the case of the county recorder, the State Department of Commerce makes a certified, true copy or microfilm, retains it, and sends the original to the Department of Commerce of the federal government in Washington, D.C. C. The Department of Commerce in Washington then makes a certified, true copy and, in addition, creates a new document, constituting a certificate of equity interest, which is labeled birth certificate. This birth certificate, however, has the child's name in all capital letters, unlike the original birth certificate filed in the county recorder on which the name was in upper and lower case letters. D. The Department of Commerce in Washington, D.C. then forwards the originals of both documents to the record repository in such locations as The Hague, for holding on behalf of the international banks, e.g., the World Bank, the Bank of International Settlement, IMF, AL. There the documents remain on deposit as the collateral asset for hypothecating into existence the credit that finances the underwriting of the world's bankrupt governments. 7. By this means, the people become the utility for the transmission of energy from reality into the fictitious, colorable realm of international commerce. The private, international law that governs the legal, commercial system today is the Uniform Commercial Code, which is established as the law of the land in the United States in Public Laws 88 to 243 and 88 to 244. The UCC is private, not public, law, and is copyrighted by Unidroit, an Italian corporation out of the Vatican. Now the people, via their all-caps names, are classified as human resources and goods under the Uniform Commercial Code, see Section 2 to 105(1) and 9 to 105(1), in which animals, i.e. humans and their unborn offspring, become goods saleable in commerce. The Department of Treasury issues bonds on the birth certificates, which are sold through securities exchanges and purchased by extending credit on the bank's books by the Federal Reserve Bank, which uses the bonds as reserves for creating credit in the fractional reserve system. The people's labor becomes the collateral for issuing Federal Reserve notes or some other form of debt obligation, see 18 U.S.C. Section 411. The bonds are held in trust for the purchaser, now the secured party and holder in due course, at the Resolution Trust Company at 55 Water Street, in New York City, about 2 blocks down the street from the Federal Reserve. It is a high-rise office building with a sign that reads, "The Tower of Power." After the New Deal, the all-caps name, hereinafter, strawman, is what the system deals with, since it cannot interface directly with real beings. The real being, however, is presumed to have ratified the deal, agreed to the pledge, by the 3 means for signifying ratification of implied contracts. Thereafter, the system functions on the basis of possessing complete authority to do anything it wishes with the strawman, which is the system's own creation and property and does not belong to the living being to whom the strawman purportedly pertains. This scheme of legal, commercial peonage and slavery is outside the Constitution, which does not apply in any matters concerning the resulting process. The system functions in the realm of private contract, private international law, in international commerce, i.e., the private international law of the private, colorable law merchant, not within the direct purview of the Constitution, which merely sanctifies the operational right to contract. Thereafter, every time the real being signs his name on any legal, commercial document, he is creating more debt currency into existence, signing as the surety, or accommodation party, per the Uniform Commercial Code Section 3 to 415. He is also placing title to whatever property is involved in the hands of the bondholder. In this scenario, the name, i.e., strawman, is credit and is a constructive trust created by operation of law, i.e., fiat, holding all the real assets, i.e., sweat equity, created by the labor of the real being. The right to the use has been separated from the title. The strawman holds the title and belongs to the bondholder, not the real being. The flesh and blood man or woman has only naked possession with a limited right to use the thing, such as one's body, possessions, or land. Such illusion of ownership and right is essential to maintain the sting on an ongoing basis, keep the people from completely rebelling if the status as slaves was self-evident, and fostering more enthusiasm to work and produce by thinking that they are doing so for their own benefit rather than for the enrichment and power of their owners, masters, rulers. When the strawman violates some rule or statute, such as is presumed whenever the strawman receives a traffic ticket, the flesh and blood being must appear at an arraignment and admit that he is the surety and accommodation party for the strawman, and thereby agree to provide the energy necessary for providing whatever fine or penalty is deemed due and payable. The real being has reconfirmed the contract of implied unification of the real being with the strawman by saying, here, when the strawman's name is called in the idem sonans, i.e., same sound, tribunal. This is why it is essential for the operation of the system that people voluntarily give their names to the court. The defendant in the action is the strawman, not the real being. The real being confirms that he is, or may legally be treated the same as, the defendant. Through this process one has entered through a door over which is inscribed, "Abandon hope all ye who enter here." It is now clear that the strawman is, 1. A nom de guerre, meaning, a name of war, whereby the strawman is regarded as being in a state of insurrection or rebellion, per Section 4 of the 14th Amendment, 12 Stat. 319, and the Trading with the Enemy Act, 2. A straminius homo, or strawman, the legal and commercial consequences, aspects of which are that it is a permanent debtor in legal incapacity, a dead estate, 3. An artificial entity owned by the secured party who bought into the bond placed on the market by the U.S. Treasury. It is important to remember that the strawman is not the property of the real being. The living man or woman is merely the surety, succor, providing the labor, life energy, and sweat equity for the fiction owned by US Inc. and the bondholder. The strawman is the front that enables the secured party to act in legal, commercial dealings without revealing his identity, and to deceive the real being, who signs in all matters as a surety and accommodation party, into thinking that the real being is doing something for himself rather than his owners, masters. Everything the real being signs on behalf of the strawman places title to whatever property is involved into the hands of the United States and the bond owner, i.e., the secured party over the strawman. Do the American people have a claim on their all-caps strawman? The short answer is, yes, but only after the American people assert that claim properly. Otherwise, the presumption remains that US Inc. and the owners of the bondholders own the strawman. The foundation of our claim is that they did not originate the strawman, but merely altered the original name by changing the upper and lower case name into a same-sounding name spelled in all capital letters without full disclosure. That all-caps name is used to finance the system of power and self-enrichment of US Inc. and its owners at the expense of the enslavement of the people. They do not possess any authority to use the name based on the unlawful object of intent to perpetrate the scheme to reduce the people to slavery and peonage by engaging in fraudulent concealment and a mountain of other crimes. In addition, it is the living being to whom the name refers that provides the labor, substance, and life force that gives value to the strawman, and thereby authorizes the real being to claim superior title to it. Those who expropriate the output of others for their own unjust enrichment, subjugate the populace, and bring about the ruin of those from whom they steal the rights, life force, labor, and wealth, have no legitimate grounds to assert a claim of superior title, either in law, equity, or commerce. There is a sequence of steps that must be done to become free of the bondage system that now enslaves mankind and regain lost freedom and independence. The system has not, to say the least, been forthcoming in educating the people concerning the true legal and commercial situation to which virtually everyone in the world is now subject. A mother having given birth to her baby is not informed that by allowing her child's birth certificate to be registered she is, for instance, 1. Informing on the baby criminally and declaring her newborn infant to be an enemy of the state with no rights, 2. Consigning the child to permanent slavery, peonage, and indentured servitude, 3. Declaring her baby to be fungible goods and the chattel property of the bankers and world powers. If full disclosure, good faith, and genuine meeting of the minds prevailed, as is required for any purported contract to be an actual, bona fide contract enforceable at law, and the people knew the truth, the banks and governments of the world would be out of business.
It says it's an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March 9th, 1933. Goes on to Statutory 1, Public Law, etc., declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent. The 73rd Congress, in session, June 5th of 1933, joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolved the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States governmental offices, officers, and departments. And it is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. The receivers of the United States bankruptcy were the international bankers via the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. All United States offices, officials, and departments are now operating within a de facto status in name only under the emergency war powers. The U.S. federal government now exists in name only. Now, what is extremely important to understand as we go through some of these policies that you're going to hear is that now all of us have been identified as the enemy. And what do I mean by that? I'm going to read to you part of Senate Report 93549. It's the Emergency Powers Statutes of 1973. It says, in order to maintain dictatorial control and authorization of the many division agencies of the executive branch, the sitting president must formally declare a national emergency every single year. This has been an ongoing ritual since 1933, according to Senate Report 93549. Once the emergency is declared, the common law is abolished, the Constitution is abolished, and we fall under absolute will of government or public policy. We're under a system of corporate public policy or war powers. All the government needs to continue is to have public opinion on their side. If public opinion can be kept in sufficient degrees on the side of the government, statutes, laws, and regulations, and executive orders can continue to be passed. The Constitution has had no meaning. The Constitution was suspended. It has been for over 80 years. We're not under law. Law has been abolished. It's important to understand that now we are the enemy of the state, which is then going to create the understanding of some of the latest genocide programs we're going to be talking about. But again, the federal and state governments are not real. They are privately owned corporations calling themselves governments.
The average healthy human being will drink up to 3 gallons of water a day. All of the planet's most ancient mythos, theos, and cosmologies record creation events that begin with water. All laws, since primordial antiquity, were written to regulate land and sea separately. Laws pertaining to land became the law of the land, or rather natural or common law, and laws pertaining to the sea became law of the sea, or rather maritime admiralty law, which is international law and the same everywhere in the world, no matter where you go. All laws since time immemorial originate from and are based upon ecclesiastical or canon law via the ancient laws and ecclesiastical right of kings. Natural or common law primarily preserves the inalienable rights and needs of human beings who live on land, differing between nations. The law of the sea, or maritime admiralty law, primarily grants the right that is legal to conduct merchant, banking, corporate, international commerce. Seeing how living persons cannot live on or in water for extended periods of time, and the earth's seas have been used primarily for travel since antiquity, regulation of the sea for merchant, trafficking, shipping, and commerce through law became necessary for the merchants of nations to do business internationally. The law of the sea, maritime admiralty law, is universal and transcends all national boundaries and laws legally. What is legal is not necessarily lawful. Natural or common law, the law of the land preserving the rights and freedoms of living persons, is lawful. Maritime admiralty law, or UCC, Universal Commercial Code, is legal, and that legal robbery and murder. In ancient Rome, a Roman maxim law stated that he who will be deceived, let him be deceived, which means the responsibility of the deception is on the one that is deceived by it. Basically, if you get it up the hoop, or what we commonly refer to as being stiffed, shafted, that's your problem. Unbeknownst to everyone, maritime admiralty law, the international law of the high seas, came upon land like a flood and made every man, woman, and child since that time dead in the water. The word maritime comes from the Proto-Italic cognates mer, mar, mare, and mari, which all mean water. These cognates are found in words like commerce and merchant and maritime. The water that flows by currents in rivers is directed by the river banks. Water that flows in the world of maritime admiralty law is money, because money is water. Money is currency. It's liquid, as in liquid assets. Money, or monai, mono-I, or simply one eye in maritime admiralty banking laws, is the lifeblood, the cash flow of the system of merchandising and traffic. To traverse this fictional world, there must be ships. Ships traverse water or the sea, and when they come to land, they come into a port. When you plug your electronic device into a computer, you're plugging it into a USB port, a universal serial bus port. The world of the internet is analogized with water as well. We have the deep web, and when you do a live social media broadcast on the internet, you are streaming the show. When a ship pulls into the port, it comes down a canal to where there is a dock, and there the ship is tied off. The ship's captain submits to the dockmaster a manifest of birth, a license and manifest of goods and services being delivered by the ship to the dock. The dock master signs the manifest claiming the cargo as property now of the ward, which includes livestock. All ships are female. A woman is a ship. A man is a fabricator. A man delivers semen into a vessel. The woman bears the cargo of the semen and labors for 9 months, wherein her water breaks and the semen in the hold come down the birth canal through a port of entry and are delivered in a hospital delivery room. According to Black's Law Dictionary, a hospital is also a bank and also a church. The woman has shipped newly birthed Admiralty maritime product, stock, livestock, cargo. A doctor will untie the ship from the cargo, stock, the product, by cutting the umbilical cord to the ship or vessel and sign a birth certificate, a manifest of birth, after the cargo has been stamped or daubed by a footprint and fingerprint with blood and ink. And after the informants, which are your parents, sign the manifest, which is plainly written on the certificate itself, your parents, the informants, are informing the doctor that the cargo, the stock, is now delivered and can be claimed by signature. The doctor signs the certificate, making you now lost at sea as unclaimed corporate property, cargo, stock, product, commodity. You are now legally dead in the water, and your name appears in all capital letters and on every other legal document. And as I said, legal is not necessarily lawful. The word capital, capital, etc. comes from the Latin caput, which means skull, and the word El, which is named for the Phoenician, Hebrew, and Roman god Saturn, which can be found in the Bible. Capitol is where we get Capitoline Hill, Golgotha, Capitol Hill, as in Washington, D.C. Caesar in antiquity ruled from the hill, just as modern-day presidents, monarchs, and popes rule from hills. A gangster may shoot someone in the head and say, "I capped him," a euphemism for a bullet causing death to the head. The word captain comes from the word capital, which means money or one eye, and equals water, the currency ration. All corporations are fictional. They exist on paper as a dead body vessel, just as your name in all caps on a birth certificate. The Constitution of the United States was formed in 1776, but the Constitution of the Incorporation of the United States was in 1871. The Corporation of the United States was formed in Delaware, Maryland in 1871 and became the United States, Inc. All citizens of U.S. Inc. have a license to work for U.S. Inc. They are employees. All corporations must have three things: a president, a vice president, and a secretary-treasurer. Everything in the world of merchant corporate banking law revolves around ships, as ships are carried by the water, which is the current sea, and all corporations are ships. If you want to have a car, you must have an ownership. If you want to be a citizen of a nation or country, you must get a citizenship. If you go into business with someone, you enter a partnership. If you want to learn a trade, you may enter an apprenticeship. Want to go to college and get your degree? Get a scholarship. Want to go buy a new car? You go down to the dealership. If you are traveling by car, you may enter a township before you enter the very town. When a man and woman get married, and the word invokes maritime admiralty law, they enter a business contract and obtain a marriage license to do business as a partnership. If you go to a church, which means a bank according to Black's law, you are going to a place of worship. Everything is a vessel, a fictional ship created out of thin air on paper in the sea of corporate commercial banking laws of pirates of the high seas. A person, according to Black's Law Dictionary, is a monster. According to canon law, Goyim, translated from the Hebrew to mean nations, cattle, chattel, animals, beasts, non-human according to rabbinical sources which are authoritative in ecclesiastical or canon law, which includes Talmudic rulings. Goyim have no rights. Admiral or admiralty laws apply to the authority of the captain, who is the admiral of the ship. The captain, or rather the admiral, who has absolute power and control of the ship, can make up the rules as he goes along. The word admiral comes from the cognates admire, and the Phoenician Hebrew Roman name of deity, Saturn El. Wherever there is a crown, you had better admire and have admiration for the king who is the captain, commander-in-chief, or else. Under common law, there's no such thing as a victimless crime, and a victim receives compensation and redress for damages. Aboard a ship, the captain can make any act of crime and he can impose sanctions accordingly. If you have a house and want to sell it, you put it up for sale. You are placing a sale on a ship which will set sail and dock to another port when sold. When you send a package somewhere abroad, you are shipping it, even though it's more than likely traveling by land. If you are losing your house, it's said that your house is underwater. If you get in trouble with the IRS, or if you go to prison, it's said you have landed in hot or deep water, and someone has to come and bail you out. A ship pulls into a port and gets tied off at a dock. When you go to a court, your case is placed in a docket. All courts in the land are judiciaries. They are judicial courts operating under mixed Roman, common, canon, and admiralty maritime law under a crown. They are ships docked on land. This, according to the Judiciary Act of 1789 passed by Congress, which made all district courts admiralty courts having maritime admiralty jurisdiction. The United States of America and the United States are two different entities. One is a corporation, the other employees of the corporation. The United States of America never ever did win its independence from the Crown in the Revolutionary War. The Charter of Virginia of 1606 granted colonists a license to settle and colonize America by the King. The Treaty of 1783, after Cornwallis surrendered to Washington at Yorktown, completely contradicts and negates the generally assumed and taught notion that America won its independence from Britain. The first article of the Treaty of 1783 relinquishes all claims to America except for the continued tribute to the King under the Charter of Virginia of 1606. The Charter was invoked by King James I, who gave you the King James Bible, and it states in Section 9 of the Charter, and I quote, "Yielding therefore to us, our heirs and successors, the 5th part of all the same gold and silver, and the 15th part of all the same copper, so to be gotten or had, as is aforesaid, without any other manner or profit or account, to be given or yielded to us, our heirs or successors. The Revolutionary War was over in 1781, but the Treaty of 1783 was signed 3 years later, which means the war was not over, nor was it won. The Treaty of 1783 upheld the tribute to the King's venture by the colonists, which means America remains to this day a British colony that pays tribute to the Crown, as imposed by the Charter of 1606. America was conquered. Liberty is not freedom. A sailor on a ship gets liberty when he's allowed to have a short leave from the vessel when the ship pulls into port. A dog has liberty on a leash when you take him for a walk. A prisoner gets liberty when he's allowed out of the cell into the courtyard for a few hours while under the careful watch of snipers. Liberty is a license. It is a privilege allowed by a ruler, owner, king, etc. to a subject of the same. America never has been the land of the free at any time. It's the land of liberty on the leash of the crown. In the year 1106, the judgments or rules of Oleron were first implemented by Eleanor of Aquitaine, after her return from the Second Crusade, having accompanied her first husband, King Louis VII. These were codified maritime admiralty laws that were supposed to protect the Crusaders' estates and titles while they went and fought the Crusades. This was based on the Greek maritime law of Rhodes of 900 BC called Lex Rhodia, which in turn came from the mariner laws codified ecclesiastically by the Phoenicians, who began their merchant mariner empire in 1586, lasting 1,000 years. In the year 1666, a great fire broke out in London while the Black Plague was ravaging Europe. The fire was intentionally set in Pudding Lane, as some historians believe, to clear out the slums to make way for what would eventually be the City of London. Parliament, behind closed doors in secret, invoked the Sesquiquavie Act of 1540, enacted by the then King Henry VIII, reworked and instated by Charles I of the time. Sesquiquavie from the Old French into English means "this killed that life." This made all men, women, and children presumed and assumed dead, and a trust set up. According to Black's Law Dictionary, Sesquiquavie means the person whose life measures the duration of a trust, gift, estate, or insurance contract. The life of a trust is 7 years under the law of limited liability. This act is most diabolically evil because it killed everyone and gave them 7 years to claim back their lives. The fires of 1666 also created the only parcel of land on the planet that does not have a title deed, the Golden Mile, the City of London, which is a corporation having its own flag, its own constitution and laws, its own defense and police forces. The Golden Square Mile holds the Bank of England, the London Metal Exchange, Fleet Street, FTSE Stock Exchange, the Royal Mint, and the Old Bailey Courthouse. The United States channels billions yearly to the Bank of England to pay the Crown's tribute. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was set up, the brainchild of a secret meeting held on Jekyll Island in 1910. As United States Inc.'s debt soared well above the estimated gold reserves the corporation of the U.S. held as a standard for the dollar, the Federal Reserve Act was passed on Christmas Eve while Congress is away, giving the power for a foreign corporate entity to print fiat and collect interest on monies created from thin air. A bank does not loan you money. That's illegal. A bank gives you credit, which is legal, but not necessarily lawful. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration was introduced, paving the way for the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. The Bolshevik Revolution broke out in Russia that was funded and began by Wall Street bankers such as Jacob Schiff and J.P. Morgan. That same year, Woodrow Wilson signed in the War Powers Act that basically stated that the U.S. was stopping all trade with the enemy except for those whom are granted a license, which excluded Americans. Licenses began to be issued in 1933. In 1933, the U.S. had reached Section 11 bankruptcy. President Roosevelt amended the War Powers Act of 1917 and declared all U.S. citizens as enemies of the state. There was a declared national emergency on March 9th, with an emergency act being passed placing all power, property, and resources of the U.S. into the hands of the President under martial law that has continued ever since. This is renewed yearly by executive order. The Federal Reserve began to print fiat money. The all-seeing eye was placed on the dollar bill. All men, women, and children born ever since arrive as collateral for U.S. Inc.'s debt, as slaves and enemies of the state. The balance of debt versus collateral is determined through illegal wars for profit, where the debt versus collateral is balanced, or rather the herd of slaves is thinned out. What all this means, ladies and gentlemen, is you are all slaves and cannon fodder for the nations you are in and who are subservient to the rulers running them. You have been turned into collateral for national debts. Consider this when hearing about the imminent collapse of the economy soon to take place. When debts cannot be paid, you are said to be in deep water, and those in deep water usually drown. Shylock, according to Shakespeare, asked for a pound of flesh to pay the bill. The owners of U.S. Inc. demand the same according to Admiralty maritime statutes you are all under. The sun never did set on the Roman Empire, and Rome is just as alive today as it was a couple thousand years ago. You are all owned property and subservient to a crown, whether you like it or not. You are all considered dead and unclaimed by the crown, who laid claim and made you their bitch. You cannot, nor are you allowed to speak for yourself, as dead persons cannot speak, and is why you need a lawyer to speak for you in a court. The dead have no rights. This is all based upon ancient ecclesiastical or canon law at its root and core. When you board a ship called a church, which is also considered a bank under maritime admiralty, and embark upon it, the licensed and registered pastor or priest must teach and keep you obedient to the monarch, the crown. Because he who wears the crown, which is the monarch, is the head of the ship called church. He is the king, the lord and captain of the ship called church, and the pastor or priest is an agent of the crown. Maritime Admiralty, or rather Universal Commercial Code, or UCC, is the matrix pulled over everyone's eyes that governs all, because everything has been made into ships on the sea of corporate commerce. Without their one eye, which is money, which is water, all ships are dead at sea and cannot traverse their fictional matrix they created. It's now high time for a concerted universal mutiny.
around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on